Within WWE 2K22's MyGM mode, there are a fair few dynamics and mechanics for players to get their heads around. You have to think about the class type and the roles in matches so that you're always fighting heels against faces and bruisers against fighters, for example. But then you also have other things to think about, such as the use of your power cards. Your overall budget and the wrestler's morale also comes into it, meaning that you're juggling quite a few things at once. Perhaps one of the most important mechanics that you need to be taking advantage of though are the rivalries. These will help you put on better shows, increase your fan base, and most importantly, defeat the other brand. So this video is going to be telling you everything you need to know about rivalries in MyGM mode. I'll be giving you tips and tricks to make sure that you're starting and managing rivalries to the best of your ability. So let's dive right into it and show you how to fully utilize rivalries in MyGM. So first off, we're going to be looking at exactly how rivalries work. As you can see in this example, I've put Finn Balor up against Big E, and on the right hand side it's created a new rivalry. Because this is the first time I've put them in the ring together, it's only level 1, but every rivalry can scale up to level 4. Once they fight at a level 4 rivalry, then the rivalry is officially complete. Generally, the further along in a rivalry you are, the better the match rating will be. Of course, other things come into this, such as the stipulation, but even normal matches should start to get good ratings after level 1 or 2. So obviously your job is to create new rivalries and manage them as they go, trying to complete as many as you can at the upcoming pay-per-views. This will give you the best chance of putting on 5-star matches and really increasing your fan base. But even though the fight in this example has immediately become a rivalry, that's really not always the case. Sometimes when you fight 2 stars, they don't actually become a rivalry. But to give yourself the best chance of this happening, you'll want to be pairing heels versus faces and then also matching their class types. So here I've put Finn Balor, who is a heel and a fighter, against Big E, who is a face and a bruiser. And more times than not, that will begin a new rivalry. It is possible to fight heels versus heels and faces versus faces and still start a rivalry, but from my experience your chances are greatly decreased. And even if they do start a rivalry, those matches won't be rated that highly anyway, due to the amount of emphasis they put on matching the class types and the roles. It's important to know that if you already have a rivalry going, that this rivalry won't increase if you put them in a tag team match against each other. I'm not really sure why, but that's just how the game works. This is also the same for run-ins. If you have 2 stars in a rivalry and you schedule a run-in from one to the other, it won't actually increase the level. So there's the basics to the rivalry mechanic, and now I'm going to move on to how to manage them once you've started them. So as I explained previously, sometimes matches just don't result in a rivalry. I've got Nikki Almost Superhero versus Shayna Baszler here, and it's gotten a mediocre and no rivalry has been formed. So I'm going to show you a way to ensure that you start a rivalry if you're desperate for 2 stars to fight each other. If a rivalry doesn't start from the first fight they have, then you can always utilise callouts to make sure that it starts the rivalry. So here, as you can see, even though the rivalry wasn't started last week, I can start it this week with the callout. This means that if you're desperate for 2 stars to start a rivalry before a PPV, make sure to always use the callout promo first and guarantee that rivalry starting. A couple of other things that I've noticed that may actually make a difference when trying to start a rivalry are where you place the superstars match in the card and also how popular they are. If you have their match take place as the opener or in the main event, they're more likely to start the rivalry. But if they're in the mid card, then they are less likely. For example, in the mid-card there, MVP and Titus didn't start a rivalry, but they're both well suited to each other. So what you can do if you have a potential rivalry that you might want to set up later on in the weeks, is give themselves promos to boost their popularity. This will give it a greater chance of starting the rivalry and should make your life a lot easier. One thing to note about callouts as well is that if your rivalry is level 4, it won't actually advance it any further. So if you want to keep a rivalry going but don't want to complete it just yet, then you can utilise callouts to make sure they stay relevant. Another thing I would suggest is to not put your wrestlers in advertising promos when they're in a rivalry, because this will decrease their popularity and make the match ratings of the rivalry not as good. So if you find yourself needing a bit of extra cash, then try and use wrestlers that you're not currently using to do the promos. Also, I've just noticed that in their second match, Finn Balor and Big E didn't increase their rivalry to level 2. So clearly it's not guaranteed that they even go up in the rivalry once you've started it. I would suggest throwing callouts in the middle of rivalries if you think it's getting a bit stale, as that's guaranteed to push the rivalry up and make sure that they're getting better ratings for their matches. Mixing your rivalries up so that sometimes they're fighting and other times they're calling them out also helps with show diversity. So I'd actually encourage putting these in every so often. If you've got a rivalry that's getting towards level 2 and 3, try to start another rivalry at the same time as it. So when that rivalry completes itself at a pay-per-view, the other rivalry can immediately take center stage and be used at the next pay-per-view. It keeps your match ratings high and your fans happy. This may seem quite hard to do as you've already got a lot of stuff to keep on top of, but honestly it's worth it because when you get to WrestleMania you want as many level 4 rivalries on that card as possible. If you have one or multiple level 4 rivalries but it's a few weeks still until your next pay-per-view, you can always hold off on fighting those stars and wait for the big show. From my experience so far, it won't de-escalate the rivalry and they'll still stay level 4 for as long as you want them to. Alternatively, if you're worried about fighting them too much, you can always do one fight every other week. So it stalls the progression of the rivalry and makes sure that you can control when the level 4 fight happens. But building on what I said earlier, if you're going to do this, make sure to throw them in some self-promos or maybe some callouts. This keeps the wrestlers relevant and also increases their popularity, meaning that when they fight at level 4 at the pay-per-view, it's pretty much guaranteed to be 4-star or higher. Usually those fights will be 4.5-star or 5-star depending on the stipulation. And also of course, titles make a difference, so keep that in mind. So to quickly summarise, always make sure to match the classes and the roles of the wrestlers to ensure the best rivalry possible. As I said, you can use clashing types, but it won't be as effective as often. If you want to guarantee a rivalry starts, then make sure to utilise the callouts. As you've seen in this video, sometimes they simply just don't start, or they'll be in a rivalry and it won't actually progress. So yeah, make sure to utilise those if you have two superstars that you really want to fight. Once the rivalry has begun, try to manage the progression of it so it completes at a pay-per-view. The reason for this is pretty obvious, it will increase the match rating and make sure that you gain as many fans from those big shows. If the superstars involved in the rivalry are low on stamina, then you can just throw them in promos and make sure to keep the rivalry relevant. And then finally, try to fill your pay-per-views with as many level 4 rivalries as you can. As previously mentioned, these are the big hitting shows that will guarantee you more fans and more money. So even if you have a few dud shows leading up to it, you can make up for that with an absolute banger of a pay-per-view. These will be the key moments where you set yourself apart from the other brand, so make sure that you're taking advantage of them. So that wraps up our video explaining how rivalries work and how to take advantage of them in WWE 2K22's MyGM mode. If you enjoyed the video and it helped you out, please do subscribe to the channel. I'm working on some more challenge videos as you watch this, so be sure to keep an eye out in the near future for those. Thank you all for watching and we'll see you in the next video.